My name is Clara Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one at every family dinner, the one who reaches for the check before anyone else even looks at it. Last Saturday morning, before my coffee had finished brewing, my phone lit up with a message from my sister. Wire me $7,200 for Sophie's Sweet 16. Underneath it came the photos. A rented ballroom strung with lights. A floor-length dress on a velvet hanger. A $700 cake shaped like a stack of designer boxes. I read it 3 times. Not because I didn't understand it, because I was waiting for the part where it made sense. 10 minutes later, my father called. His voice was calm, the way it always is right before he says something that isn't. And what he told me that morning was the reason that, by 7:30 the next day, I did something none of them saw coming. I've spent 10 years being the family's quiet answer to every emergency. My sister Renee doesn't send prices. She sends pictures and lets the pictures ask for her. By the time anyone mentions money, the deposit's already been paid, and the only question left is who's covering the rest. That question has always had the same answer. Me. It didn't start with $7,200. It started small. A transmission when Sophie was 6, a security deposit, a phone bill Renee swore she'd pay back by the 15th. Each one wrapped in the same sentence. You're the only one I can ask. And I always was. I moved the money before I let myself feel it leaving because feeling it would have meant admitting there was a pattern. And admitting the pattern would have meant doing something about it. So I didn't count. I kept every receipt in a folder I never opened, the way you keep a smoke detector you assume is working. I told myself I paid because I could afford it. That was the easy answer, so I let people believe it. The true one was smaller and worse. I paid because when I paid, I mattered. I grew up the reliable daughter in a house where love was loud and money was tight. And somewhere along the way I learned the safest way to be needed was to be useful. Renee was the one people worried about. I was the one people counted on. Those aren't the same thing, and the second one is lonelier than it looks. Nobody checks on the reliable one. They just check whether she's available. What none of them knew was the timing. 2 weeks before that text, I'd started paperwork on a condo. Nothing grand. A 2-bedroom on the east side with a leak under the kitchen sink. I'd been saving for it since I was 26, in one account with a lock on it, the only account in my life nobody had ever touched. My loan officer had been clear. Don't move large sums before closing. $7,200 wasn't a favor I could absorb. It was the difference between signing in March and starting over. I called Renee, keeping my voice easy. I just wanted to see the full budget, I told her. Not to argue, just to understand it. There was a pause, the kind she does when she's deciding how much truth to hand me. Family takes care of family, Clara, she said. That's just what we do. It never means all of us take care of all of us. It means the ones who can carry the ones who won't, and everyone calls it love so nobody has to call it what it is. You already handled the venue deposit, she added. Back in the fall. So really it's not even that much more. I sat very still. I did remember the way you remember a dream that turns out to have been real. A frantic call in October. The ballroom about to go to someone else. A card needed to hold the date. Mom's was maxed. Dad's was a joke. Mine cleared. You'll pay it back, she'd said. I'd said sure and closed the folder like always. Before I decided my father was a simple man, I need to tell you what I saw 2 Christmases ago. I'd gone looking for a phone charger and found him instead at his desk, reading glasses down his nose, writing a check against a credit card statement that wasn't his. It was Renee's. He was drawing it from the pension account meant to last him and my mother the rest of their lives, quickly, quietly, like paying a ransom. He looked up, saw me, and neither of us ever spoke of it again. My father, who preaches that family takes care of family, was drowning in the very water he kept pushing the rest of us into. He wasn't cruel. He was afraid. Raised in a house where the only way anyone said I love you was by handing over money they couldn't spare. That Saturday afternoon, I decided this time would be different. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It was a woman at a counter finally asking the question out loud. I opened the group chat and typed, not a refusal, a request. Can we see the full budget before anyone decides who's paying what? My thumb hovered over the arrow a long time. Send it, and I stopped being the reliable one. Pressed it. For 4 minutes, nothing. The longest silence my family has ever given me. Then the bubbles started. My aunt first. Since when do we make each other fill out forms, Clara? My mother, threading her usual needle. I'm sure Clara didn't mean it like that. Nobody sent a number. In my family, a request for a number is never met with a number. It's met with a feeling, aimed straight at your conscience. Then Renee escalated the way she always does. Not with numbers, with a child. A photo landed in the chat. Sophie in the fitting room mirror, trying to look happy and not quite managing it. Underneath it, guess I'll tell her the party's off because her aunt wants a spreadsheet. She'll understand. My chest went tight. For 1 full second, I was ready to send the money just to make the picture stop existing. That's the machinery of it. Renee doesn't come at you with anger, she comes at you with a child, because a child is the one thing I've never been able to say no to. But I looked at the photo again. Not at the dress, at Sophie's face. She didn't look like a girl afraid of losing a party. She looked like a girl afraid of what the party was doing to the adults around her. I drove out to see my mother the next morning, certain she'd stand with me. She was at the sink when I walked in. You've always been the strong one, Clara, she said, without turning around. Would it kill you to smooth it over? Just this once. Even the peacemaker had a checkbook where her spine should be. Sophie was waiting on the porch steps when I got home, 15, all elbows and quiet watchfulness. She sat beside me and said without looking up, "You don't have to pay for it, Aunt Clara." She'd told her mother she didn't even want the ballroom. She wanted a backyard, some string lights, her actual friends. "It's not really for me," she said flatly, like something she'd known a while and finally stopped hoping wasn't true. My 15-year-old niece had figured out in one conversation what it took me a decade to name. The party wasn't about her birthday. It was about my sister proving, to a family that measures love in money, that she loved her daughter the most. And Sophie was going to be the bill nobody asked her opinion on. I put my arm around her. And sitting on those cold steps, I made a different decision than the one I'd driven out with. I wasn't going to protect the party. I was going to protect the kid. That night I couldn't sleep, so I did the thing I'd avoided for 10 years. I took the folder off the shelf. I made coffee at midnight and opened a spreadsheet because a folder is a feeling but a spreadsheet is a fact. Column A, the date. Column B, what it was for. Column C, the amount. Column D, paid back, was going to be very lonely. I started with the transmission 8 years back, $900, and worked forward, refusing to round, refusing to soften a single figure. The deposits. The phone bills. The credit card I'd covered the summer Sophie broke her arm. The venue hold in October. Around 1 in the morning, I stopped typing and looked at the total in the corner of the screen. For a long moment I couldn't make myself scroll down to see the rest. $41,360. 10 years. Not $1 in column D. I didn't cry. I just looked at it. That was a down payment on the 2-bedroom with the leak under the sink. That was a decade of a family I loved, quietly built on a foundation I'd never once let myself examine. And then I saw the thing that turned grief into a plan. Pulling up the actual contracts to get the numbers right, I saw whose name was on them. The venue hold, my card. The cake deposit, my card from the night Renee's own card had declined. The dress on layaway, my name on the plan because you have better credit, Clara. They'll approve you. For 10 years I'd felt like the family's wallet, passive, opened on demand. But a wallet has no power. A signatory does. And somewhere in the fog of favors, I had become the person legally attached to the very party I was being ordered to fund. The holds were mine to place, which meant they were mine to release. I tried the reasonable thing first. I sent Renee a calm message, the kind I'd send a client whose numbers didn't add up. I loved her, I loved Sophie, and I wanted a real budget planned honestly together. I offered a real number out in the open. No more surprise deposits. She called instead of texting, and her voice broke right on schedule. So that's it. I'm a line item now. Your own sister. To me, a budget was respect. To her, it was an accusation, proof I saw the family the way I saw my clients, columns instead of people. Real families don't count, she said, and hung up before I could answer. Then the vendors started calling, and that's when the trap fully closed. The venue emailed first. A polite reminder that the balance was due within 72 hours, and that the card on file would be charged automatically if payment wasn't arranged. The card on file was mine. My phone buzzed again while I was still staring at that email. The screen said Dad. And I knew before I answered that he was calling to close the door I'd just found. He didn't ask my side. He explained the family to me like I'd forgotten the rules. I had the good job, I was the strong one, this was simply what strong ones did. I stayed quiet, and into that silence he said the thing I will hear for the rest of my life. His voice never even hardened. He said it gently like it was obvious. Like it was love. Pay up, Clara. Or you're no longer family. I looked at the venue's countdown clock still glowing on my screen, 71 hours and shrinking, and I understood exactly what I had to do, and exactly how little time I had left to do it. I didn't argue with him. I didn't cry. I said, "Okay, Dad," in a voice so steady it surprised us both, and I hung up. Then I did the thing I do at work when a number comes in that changes the whole audit. I got very, very calm. I sat with the feeling in one chair and the facts in the other, and I looked straight at what was actually true. If I paid the $7,200, I wouldn't be buying Sophie a party. She'd already told me she didn't want one. I'd be buying another decade of exactly this. Another folder that never got opened. My father hadn't threatened me. He'd made me an offer and finally made the terms clear. Keep paying. Stay family. And for the first time in my life, I let myself finish the thought he'd started. What kind of family charges admission? But calm isn't the same as brave, and I have to be honest about the wall I hit next. Once I imagined actually stopping, not paying, not fixing, an old question surfaced. Who was I to them if I didn't pay? For 10 years, covering things had been my whole place in the family. Take that away, and I honestly didn't know what was left. I saw, harder than the $41,000, that my quiet generosity hadn't been the opposite of Renee's neediness. It was the same wound in a nicer coat. She got love by taking. I got it by giving. Neither of us had ever believed we could be loved plainly, with nothing attached. The only way to find out was to take the money off the table and see who stayed. I read every contract that night, line by line. The venue deposit was gone either way, but I could still stop the balance from ever leaving my account. Same with the cake. Same with the dress. Added up, and the holds in my name came to almost exactly the $7,200 my sister had ordered me to wire. I'd just be deciding it stayed in my account instead of hers. There was only one catch. The venue's clock was already running, and it wouldn't wait for me to feel ready. Tonight or the party became mine forever. I made myself sit with the real costs first because it wasn't the deposit money. It was this. The moment I canceled, the secret was over. Everyone would learn the venue, the cake, the dress had all been on my card the whole time. That quiet, invisible Clara had been bankrolling it from behind the curtain. I'd hidden it for 10 years and told myself it was humility. It wasn't. Hiding it let me feel needed without ever being seen. Canceling meant stepping out from behind that curtain and standing in the kitchen as a person with limits. Person who could be hurt. At 11:04 that night, I called the venue's after-hours line. A bored young man read me the terms. The deposit was non-refundable. The reservation would release immediately. I said I understood. I authorized it. Okay, he said. That's canceled. You'll get a confirmation email. Then he went back to whatever he'd been eating, and just like that, the ballroom was gone. I canceled the cake. I stopped the layaway on the dress. 3 calls, maybe 11 minutes total, and a decade of a certain version of me ended in the time it takes to microwave dinner. Before I slept, I did one more thing, the calmest, coldest, kindest thing I've ever typed. I told the family chat that the holds had been in my name, and I could no longer keep them there. I said I loved Sophie, and I wasn't going to explain myself over text. I said I'd be at my parents' house at 7 the next morning, if anyone wanted to talk. Then I printed the spreadsheet. All 10 years. $41,360. One empty column. I set it by my keys so I wouldn't forget it, though there was no chance of that. I wasn't bringing it to shame anyone. I was bringing it because I was done being the only person in the family who knew the truth. I got to my parents' house at 6:50. Renee's car was already there. I gave myself one more minute, then walked in. Just as her phone lit up on the kitchen table, screen up, and we all read it at once. Your reservation has been canceled. Timestamp, 7:28. Renee's face went through something I'd never seen it do. Confusion sliding into horror in about 2 seconds. What is this? Not really a question. The venue canceled. It says the reservation's been released. She looked up at me. My father looked up from his coffee. My mother froze at the counter with a dish towel in her hands. Clara, my father said slowly, what did you do? I set the folder on the table square to the edge. I canceled the holds that were in my name. All of them. Last night. The kitchen erupted. Renee came at me first, loud and certain. I'd ruined it, waited until the last second, ruined my niece's birthday to make a point because I was bitter, because I couldn't stand to see anyone happy. My father stood. That's enough, both of you, he said, looking only at me. My mother was already crying. We can fix this, honey. We can still fix this. And I knew exactly who we meant in that sentence. It always meant me. I didn't raise my voice. I never have in that house, and I wasn't going to start the morning I finally stopped being afraid of it. When the noise ran out of air, I put 2 fingers on the folder and slid it to the center of the table. Before anyone says another word about fixing, I said, I want everyone to see what we've actually been fixing for 10 years. Nobody touched it, so I opened it myself and turned the pages so they could read them right side up. 10 years of my family's love, rendered in a currency they'd sworn we never counted in. $41,360. One empty column. For faces going pale in a kitchen that had spent a decade insisting we weren't the kind of family that kept score. I could have closed the folder right there. Said I'd overreacted, that I'd cover the party one last time. And the relief in that room would have been instant. I'd have kept my chair, my title, my father's approval, and walked out still the wallet. I didn't take that road. I looked at my sister, whose face was wrecked, and said the truest thing I know. Renee, I paid for all of it. The venue, the cake, the dress. They were on my card in my name this whole time. And every line on these pages is me too. I'm not showing you this to hurt you. I'm showing you because I love you too much to keep lying to you about what I've been doing. My father made a sound like he wanted to speak. I kept going. And I'm not canceling because I stopped loving Sophie. I'm canceling because I finally started. That was the sentence that cost me. I watched it land. My mother crumpling, my father turning away, Renee's mouth opening with nothing coming out. Sophie was in the doorway by then, eyes filling, and I didn't take a word of it back. Every cell in me screamed to soften it, to fix their faces the way I always fix things. I let them hurt instead because the alternative was keeping us all sick and calling it peace. I'm not doing this anymore, I said. No more surprise deposits. No more holds in my name. I looked at Renee. But I'm not walking away from you either. If you want, we can sit down and build something for Sophie we can both actually afford. I'll put in a real number where you can see it. Not under it. Never under it again. She didn't answer. My father walked out the back door and let it slap shut. I let him go. I understood he wasn't storming off in anger so much as fleeing a language he'd never learned how to speak without money in it. My mother sat down and put her face in her hands. It wasn't a happy ending. Nobody hugged me. Nobody said I was right. But standing in the wreckage of a morning I'd chosen, I felt something I had never once felt in that house in 34 years. I felt like myself. Not the wallet. Not the fixer. Just Clara. The weeks after were quieter than I expected, and lonelier. My father didn't call for a month. 2 aunts stopped speaking to me altogether. In certain living rooms, I became the daughter who abandoned her family over money, and I let them think it because you can't correct a story in a house that needs you to be the villain. But my savings sat exactly where they were supposed to. My loan closed in March. I signed the papers on the 2-bedroom with the leak under the sink, and I stood in the empty living room afterward and cried. Not from grief, but from the strange vertigo of a future that was finally entirely mine. Renee scaled the party down to a backyard, some string lights, and 30 of Sophie's actual friends. It was, by every account, the best night of that girl's year. I wasn't invited. A wound I'm still letting heal at its own speed. But Sophie sent me a photo from it. Just her and her friends laughing under the lights. Wish you were here, the caption said. I hadn't paid for a single thing at that party, and it was, without question, the most love my family had ever made out of the least money. The text that told me it had all been worth it came 4 months later from Sophie. She'd gotten a part-time job, opened her first savings account, and wanted to know if I could show her how to build one of those spreadsheets. There was a school trip she wanted to plan, and she wanted to know the real number before she asked her mother for anything. I read that message standing in my own kitchen and had to sit down on the floor because that was the whole thing right there. That was the chain breaking one link early enough to matter. Sophie was going to grow up knowing that love and a budget aren't enemies, that you can look straight at a number and still be generous, still be kind, still be family. Renee called that same week, and for the first time in longer than I can remember, it wasn't about money at all. She just said she'd been thinking about me. We're not fixed. We may never be all the way fixed. But love that keeps a balance isn't love, and love that never checks the balance isn't safe. And I finally know how to hold both at once. So I think, well, Sophie,